Kerblogging down a dream that never would have come to me. Working on a mystery for a question that needs answering. Kerblogging down a dream. We're back. Took a little break to spray my fan juice everywhere about Zootopia, but I'm kind of continuing onward. It's not quite been like a themed month because I think it carried over from February, but I've been kind of answering like a series of different questions that have all been kind of like related and aligned to being creative, and I'm kind of continuing forward. This is a relatively new one that I just got from Kudo Surugi. Hey Kerb, I was hoping I could get your opinion on something for a future topic. I've been working on a story and I hope to animate, and its plot mainly centers around mysteries. I was wondering, what is your opinions on making a good mystery, and how would you keep it interesting without dragging it out? Thanks for your time, and good luck with future projects. So part of the reason that I'm doing this one first, rather before another certain topic that I got, is because there's a kind of a there's a planned sequel for this topic that has to do with, what the response to that sort of thing is. When you build a mystery in a story. And once again, kind of like I said with the storytelling process Kirblog that I did recently, I'm mostly going to be using Tome as an example in terms of like what I decided to do, but hopefully it will still, work and answer the question for what it's supposed to be. Something recent, and I think I might have even said this in the storytelling Kirblog, but it still bears repeating, is that something I learned from, I think it was an interview with Alex Hirsch, the creator of Gravity Falls, that it's actually better to have a mystery built up and people be able to guess what it is, as opposed to it coming completely out of nowhere and taking them by surprise. The actual feeling of the viewer feeling gratified that they were able to see it coming is better than it's more positive than like, whoa, I didn't see that coming, because the whoa, I didn't see that coming can also come into like, well, that was out of nowhere, and that can alienate and kind of get not the greatest reaction ever. For instance, I know that in my case, I might have talked about this before. No, I did. I talked about this before in the Kingdom Hearts Kirblog. But I think I had told the story about when Birth by Sleep came out. I guessed correctly the fate of a certain character. I won't spoil it in case any of you guys haven't played that game before, because I recommend it. It's very good. Mike Lucas and I played through it semi-recently, and I really enjoyed it. But I guessed one of the twists based off of that big, awesome CG trailer from the end of Kingdom Hearts 2. And when it happened, I saw it, the scene where like my theory basically came true. I was like, oh, that's awesome, and it was well done, and it made sense, and it worked for exactly what was supposed to happen with it. And so that's a an example in that sort of case. In the case of Tome, I talked about this before. Go back and listen to that in case you haven't heard the storytelling process Kirblog, because it has a lot to do with this in particular. And I'm going to be talking about a lot of Tome spoilers. So for those of you who have not watched Trade of Magical Expertise yet, please also do that. I would very much appreciate it, because we put a lot of work into it. But yeah, from here on out, I'll be talking about a lot of major character spoilers, because it's relevant to the topic. So I planned out a lot of things with the main 5 characters, like I was saying last time, about how I wanted each of the 5 main characters to have an important purpose in the grand scheme of the story, that is. And kind of what I ended up doing as a result of that is I fused certain characters together, and by that I mean like what were once individual characters in the old TV Tome Adventures show that predates Tome. I decided to make cross together into one thing instead. Or in some cases, kind of take certain traits and put them to something else. Examples include, and again, here we go into the spoiler territory, I gave the purple flame, quote-unquote, the antivirus, which was previously to Kerbifer. I took that and gave that to Flame Girl, because I felt that would make a little bit more sense and give her more of a purpose towards the end in terms of what the big plan was. Which, speaking of which, having Kerbifer and Zeto be the same person was a big thing that I'm going to get more into the specific details of in a little bit here. But that was one thing that led itself to being a really, really interesting part of the entire story as a whole. And then also the big final one, having Game Crazed and the character that was once known as Motherboard, now as Softy, the Tome version of them, or Tome equivalent of that character. Having them be the same person made for a really interesting arc that, in that case, wasn't resolved or wasn't fully revealed until the very end of the show. And on that same note, revealing who the big final villain was going to be that was kind of pulling the strings behind all the shit that was happening, that was the trickiest to pull off, and there was a lot of conflict internally about whether that was the right thing to do or whether that was going to be satisfying, etc. And again, some of this I'll be covering, I think, in the sort of sequel to this topic, but I'll try to stay on hand. Building mysteries is definitely tricky business. It can be some of the trickiest things about your storytelling because it needs to all be worth it. Not just in terms of like it being satisfying, like what I was saying at the beginning, like, you know, whether you guess it right or whether it, you know, was a surprising experience in like a cool sort of way, but more so in how it impacts the story as a whole. One could even say that an even deeper mystery that didn't have anything to do with specifically the characters, or rather not like an individual character, that is the forbidden power in Tome, the virus, which, you know, again, obviously, if you've seen the show, you know it was the supernatural, the mainly supernatural thing, it and Softy, as it's revealed in episode 0, you know, in terms of like the big threat. Because yeah, you could say in kind of the long run, the virus is like the real threat, quote unquote, of the entire overall story, and exactly how it came into being and what it is, and et cetera, and trying to plant little, you know, seeds around that on like why that exists and how that came to be and everything. You know, that was something that kind of, I think, in tandem with the development of the characters, you know, came more and more outward. In the case of the biggest one that I think I'm glad changed in the middle of production is the reveal to the audience about the twist of Kerbifer and Zeto being the same player. I'd mentioned some further details, I think, about this in a lot of the, you know, fact bubble behind the scenes videos, and maybe on some of the commentaries and stuff. But for the sake of this particular conversation here, that was not originally planned to happen. That reveal was not going to happen in the midway point of the show. I was intending on saving that for the big moment in the last episode where Alpha like puts 2 and 2 together and finds out, you know, that it was him. So in that case, I think that actually revealing it earlier to the audience specifically and not to the other characters helped, you know, really, really like make the show a lot more unique and have a lot more interesting storytelling moments with the characters. Because the audience being aware of what the twist of that mystery was, and actually not just Kerbifer and Zeto, but also, how could I forget, another character that I kind of fused together, sort of, was, or rather put in a different role, as I had Kizuna be the hacker boss, which in TTA was this character called Voltarius, which turned out to be Zeto. But instead I had Kizuna be the leader of the debuggers.org hacker organization, basically, and that worked out to being a much more... I feel it gave her a much more interesting role, and then, you know, she became a lot more developed over the course of the show too, which was not planned, not planned to the extent that it came out, and I'm really happy with how she turned out as well. Not everybody was, but again, that will be for the sequel to this topic. But anyway, sorry to keep cock teasing that, but again, there's a point to all this. Anyway, but yeah, so basically the characters not being aware of what the twist of that mystery was yet, that was what made that cool, because then it's no longer a mystery to the audience. That mystery is something that is resolved in terms of, you know what the answer is, but it's not resolved in terms of how it's going to impact the characters. You know, and actually a great kind of correlation, because I mentioned Alex Hirsch earlier, Gravity Falls. Throughout most of season 2, you know that Grunkle Stan is hiding something. And then, you know, without spoiling that, in case you guys haven't seen it, because I can spoil my own show, I won't spoil somebody else's. Or just like with Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep earlier. Basically, by the halfway point of season 2 of Gravity Falls, the characters find out finally what this big mystery is. And granted, the audience doesn't know exactly what it is yet, not until it is revealed, but it's the fact that they know that he is hiding something, and they know that Stan has got something going on behind the scenes away from the kids specifically. That's what mounts a lot of suspicion. Then it comes to and the midway point episode of season 2 where it's revealed is a super dramatic, awesome episode. Interestingly, kind of my equivalent, and by the way, I'm not saying I even like lifted these ideas, but I'm saying they were similar kind of like, you know, story beats and maybe even tropes, I guess, to some extent. The big conversation in episode 12 where Alpha confronts the Net Kings and calls them out on what happened with the forbidden power and everything. The audience knowing that Kerbifer is Zeto and he's related to all this stuff in the first place helped make that scene so much more tense and interesting and exciting, even for me. Like that is now one of my favorite scenes in the entire show, just to go back and look at that, to see like how like intense it is, and like everybody's acting was great. I tried to make the camera angles kind of like, all intense on Kerbifer and like, sweating bullets and everything. So in that kind of case, the mystery is like for the characters themselves that they're solving, which led into episode 13, the beginning act, where they're trying to figure out what is the deal behind this, why is this happening, kind of thing. So that's a very important factor as well, like that in and of itself, of the characters, in the confines of the story, trying to solve the mysteries of what's going on too. Because it's the same thing again. Like I'm thinking about Dipper and his obsession with, and later another certain character who again I won't spoil in case you haven't seen them. Them trying to solve the mysteries of Gravity Falls. Like that's part of what makes it engaging for the audience to see. And you were talking about in your question about dragging it out. I think the fact that if I actually would have gone with the original plan of not having the twist with Kerbifer and Zeto revealed until like the last episode, like that would have been like ridiculous, and that would have been dragging it out, I think, in retrospect, in a way that would have been too, like, it would have felt out of left field, or it would have been very unclear to the audience, because that was the thing. For a lot of after episode 10 happened, everybody wasn't entirely sure yet about if Kerbifer and Zeto were the same person. It wasn't totally clear that they were the same player, in fact. And it took until we got, through season 2 that everybody was like, okay, this is pretty, clear now as to what's going on here with this, this single character under these two different identities, basically. And I think that building up to, and because everybody knew, I remember I was watching the Tumblr fandom and all these different posts and things and comments about like, oh man, I can't wait until I know it's coming, the moment where Alpha finds out, and it did, and we tried to make it like, as dramatic as I was planning for it to be since the beginning. That was something I did always plan, is that I wanted that big reveal to be like really heart-wrenching, especially for how much stuff that the characters would have been going through with each other by that point. So in that case, that allowed it to not, that allowed us to not stretch it out in a way that was, and especially because in episode 15, I don't even want to imagine how ridiculous it would have been, like how like whoa, in reaction everybody would have been if all of these twists were revealed at the same time, because even there's hints kind of scattered throughout. I think like a fair amount of them in the episodes about Game Crazed real identity too, and actually that's a good one to talk about right here as well. So in the case of Game Crazed being Softy. So originally, episode 0 was going to be the beginning of the season. I've talked about this on many commentaries before, too. The reason that I moved it to the midway point was because I didn't want people to guess immediately what Game Crazed's real identity was. And I thought that putting it right after episode 13, so before the big infiltration mission and everything happened, would have mounted a lot more suspicion and intrigue and everything. And I think a fair number of people did put 2 and 2 together on Softy when they first saw her. And they could hear her voice, and I think even people figured out that like it was Casey in disguise using like a fake name in the credits and all that stuff, which we kind of was a little joke with us. And even I did that too with Kerbifer and Zeto in the early episodes, just to try and like mount it a little bit. But yeah, so I tried to I tried to leave a fair amount of seeds of like what was really going on. Even actually going back to the Kerbifer and Zeto thing too, because I knew that twist from the beginning as well. And a lot of people thought I like made it up on the fly or whatever, but no, that was always designed that way. And there were little tiny things like. In episode 2, for instance, like one of the really early ones, when Kerbifer's like still in beta, huh? When he's talking about Asteroid's shield, because obviously he's in league with the hackers and Cusanon and all that. So the point of them going after it was because they needed it for their mission and all that. So the fact that he had little reactions and or other little things like that, I can't think of too many examples off the top of my head, but stuff like that, I tried to be conscious of, to just lay little minor things. And that's another thing, too, is there is value to even going back and rewatching something, knowing what all of the answers are, and then being able to spot, oh, that was leading up to this. Oh, that makes so much sense now. Oh, this is why that character was doing that. That can also be a payoff. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, because not everything has to be set up in such a way like, oh, it's required that you go back and hunt for things. That's just like a little bit of an extra thing of like, if you're a fan and you're dedicated and you want to go back and like, dissect more further things about a story. And I'm not just talking about tone, I'm talking about anything. I mean, like Gravity Falls was absolutely a show designed fully for that sort of activity of like, decoding what the different like ciphers were and like looking for all these little hints kind of scattered around and everything. There was a whole like featurette about that on Disney XD recently, I think before the finale aired, where like you can go back and look and find all these things kind of scattered around. That's cool, but that's not necessarily a requirement But if you put a lot of thought into that for your own story, and you can have that work in a way that like it doesn't interfere with whatever is mainly going on in the central story of whatever the episode is, or however long the overall story is. I don't know how you're going to be pacing it out to anybody, not just the person who asked this, but anybody in general who's been thinking about this for their own stories. It's entirely up to you on how you pace it out, but it's just a bonus. It's not like an absolute rule that you have to follow or anything. The last big example was the villain, was the big unveiling of that. Again, spoilers in case you haven't seen the show, so this is the last warning. Ruby Rules being the big guy that was pulling the strings behind that. I'm going to talk about a lot of this on the next like the sequel to this topic, but I'll just say that Liz and I in the writing process, we had a lot of discussions and a lot of arguments even about whether that was the right thing to do, if that was going to be a satisfying experience in the end. And, there was a lot of debate, and we had some different ideas. We played with like different things for how the finale was going to go. There was at one point where Kizuna was going to actually be like the big final one who was doing everything because of her motivations against Softy and all this stuff. But, and then even maybe having like Neo Mutant be the one doing everything on his own, and Ruby Rules had nothing to do with it. There were a lot of different ideas. And you know what? I'll even admit, because it's completely objective, I guess, in that case, but it's very possible that maybe one of those ideas could have feasibly been better than what I've been planning. But I wanted Ruby Rules to be the big villain, not just for the sake of like, oh my god, it's a big twist or whatever. Like, I genuinely believed in that idea, and I did have to fight for it, and whether or not it was the best idea to go with in the end is debatable. Like it's completely because I saw that there were some people who were like, oh really, like that was kind of out of nowhere. Because I will say this, I definitely wanted to make sure that Exec was not the villain, and I did, as a little tiny mystery. This is a very small scale one comparatively, but I tried to make him look suspicious because he was the big villain behind the villain in TV Tome Adventures, and I did not want to have him be that again in this one. So what I did was I had a little bit of some red herring-isms with the way that I animated him and his facial expressions and his tone of voice and everything during episode 0 and stuff like that to make him come a little off as like rough around the edges and everything, but also laying some little minor hints about Ruby Rules and kind of what his whole deal was. And some people did predict that too, and they did see that coming, and they were satisfied and everything. I was going to say earlier regarding being satisfied. At the AX screening, when everybody saw the big reveal of Softy and GC being the same person, that was like that got a huge reaction. Everybody was clapping and cheering. So that definitely proves the point earlier about the satisfaction of knowing that you were right. It definitely does pay off in the end. And there were gasps and horrors and like, oh my god, at Ruby Rules being revealed too. In that case, it had more to do with I did want there to be a big like unexpected kind of thing in the final episode, and I genuinely believed in having that idea kind of placed and designed from the beginning. But again, I think that kind of what comes from that, we'll talk more about that in the next video. But yeah, kind of final thoughts about this. My big main pieces of advice are: don't be disappointed with if mysteries are figured out more easily in like a satisfying way. Definitely don't make them the centerpiece of the entire story, like interfering so much with the characters' actual developments and experiences, because that'll just cheapen the story as a whole, and it'll make the mysteries feel like more gimmicks. And then make sure to have all the major mysteries that you plant in your universe have a real sense of purpose that will not only be satisfactory as a mystery-solving, like detective kind of way, but also have something to do with the overall story and characters in a way that is really meaningful and important in the long run. That'll do it. So I hope that helped. Next week, I guess it's just a little preview since I've been teasing about it so much for the last 20 minutes. It's going to be response versus intention is going to be the main purpose of that one. I might even, if I'm up for it, I might even record it like shortly after this, just to like kind of keep the ball rolling on the subject. But in the meantime, in the comments below, what are your thoughts on how mysteries are are they a big payoff, or are they just, do you feel like they're just shock value? Do they feel like they just kind of come out of nowhere? Do you think that they are a really cool element that maybe could be utilized more in a way that Gravity Falls did? Did you like the mysteries in Tome if you were a fan of the show? Like, let me know. Let me know all your thoughts about the entire thing. I'm curious. And even though I have the next one planned out, if you have future Kirblog topic suggestions, because you guys have been giving me so many really good ones, like I have so many to go through in just this past month alone, and I've been really enjoying them. So thanks so much for that. Leave a comment about that too, or hit me up on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, whatever you feel like. And thanks for mistering. Good job. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you all later. Have a great one. Bye-bye.